Grace, mercy, and peace to you from our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. Well, it's been a storied week. So full of so many stories, as I suspect the weeks to come will likely follow. It's been weeks like this one just passed that our ears begin to perk up to some of the stories that get told. This past week, many of the stories that you and I listened to were biographical. All of those stories that help us to remember how and why Aretha earned the title Queen of Soul. Or the stories that surrounded that particular and former POW, now Senator John McCain, whose 106-year-old mother attended the funeral of her child. My mother, whom we commended to God's mercy this past week, did that twice. The first time at the tragic death of her then 24-year-old son, my brother, David. And then 20 years later, she attended the funeral of her oldest child, my sister, Diane. If I am grateful for, if I am at peace with anything, one of the things that I am certainly at peace with is that she did not have to lose either of her two remaining children before she got reunited with the others. Yes, we told some stories this week. We told stories about the one whose waters ran deep, and it was the stillness of those waters that helped them, her and others, that helped them bear the turbulent waters up top on the surface of life. It's what the pastor said. He said that the key to the lives of the saints. Why were the saints called saints? He said because they were cheerful when it was difficult to be cheerful. They were patient when it's difficult to be patient. They pushed on when they wanted to stand still. And they kept silent when they wanted to talk or scream or yell or fight. They were agreeable when they wanted to be disagreeable. That was all. And it was quite simple. And it always will be. Now, this is not a homily about or a eulogy about my mother or any other particular person, so much as it is about those whose attention have been turned to the inner space. Somebody aspiring to and running on the ticket for the highest political office in this land was heard to say, maybe not too many years ago, that the next space we really need to conquer is inner space. I listened to an interview this past week on a podcast. And it had to do with the human mind and with what the social psychologists call implicit bias. Which is to say, she said, the power of the less conscious mind and the power that it has on the things that we say and the things that we do. The person being interviewed is the author of a book that she entitled Blind Spot: Hidden Biases of Good People. Her goal was not to tag any particular person or any group of people specifically, so much as to make us aware that we all have our blind spots. And that they are simply the result of how we work to create order out of the chaos of living in this world. It seems that there may have been the Pharisees' own blind spots that Jesus is trying to make them aware of when he calls a whole bunch of them hypocrites. They seem to have gotten at least part of the problem correct. But the real problem is that there's no partial credit for these problems. And if you get the wrong part of the problem right. The part they got right, for better or for worse, of course, is their loyalty to the religious rules, to the holiness code of conduct, if you will. Every aspect of human life, everything that can be done in a holy way, they would say. And apparently they believe themselves to be the officers of holy conduct. Even though Jesus unloads on them with both barrels, and although good folks like you and I will criticize these guys for rejecting our Messiah, they were not really bad people altogether. They were, in fact, good people. Folks who take seriously their faith. And they were concerned about pleasing God and trying to live an honorable life. Chances are most of us know a Pharisee. Chances are most of us have a Pharisee on our best friends list. Somebody who has, if we take away the name Pharisee, the tag Pharisee or saint, somebody, and we put their name in their place somewhere, there's somebody whose quiet, steady virtue has seemed like a lighthouse to us as we've tried to navigate through the foggy night on our way into some harbor somewhere. If only these ones who kept such high standards were able to avoid the apparent distinction between themselves and those on the other side of the bell curve. But they didn't. Their love for the law, their love for doing what is right in the right way seemed to trump their ability to love the other. Which is what Jesus not only said, but lived completely. The sum of the commandments, Jesus said, love the Lord your God with all of your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. Perhaps implicitly, the Pharisees were aware that the pest that was their blind spots were causing. What is one to do with all of those unresolved issues in our lives and in our hearts and in our souls? The conflict, the poor self-esteem, the shame, the scars, the guilt, the scars from one kind of abuse or another that we have suffered in this life. What is someone supposed to do with all of that garbage? Well, the quickest and simplest answer, of course, is that you find yourself a vice. You find yourself a vice to practice, to lean upon, or you go and find yourself a good scapegoat. Somebody else to tag that junk on so you don't have to deal with it yourself. Barbara Brown Taylor tells about the dilemma that she remembers that one of the German officers experienced in Schindler's List when he finds himself falling in love with his Jewish maid, Helen Hirsch. One night he goes down into the cellar where she lives, ostensibly or apparently to commend her for the good work that she's been doing. But attracted nonetheless to her beauty, he walks around her, and that recording in the back of his mind, that implicit recording begins to play. In spite of when his eyes see, that recording in his mind begins to play, and the words come out of his mouth. I understand that, strictly speaking, you are not a human being. I understand that, strictly speaking, you are a Jewish vermin. I know, but I ask you, are these the eyes of a rodent? And are these the lips of a rodent? Is that the hair of a rodent? And in the insane consequence of that turmoil, that inner struggle going on within him between his presumed superior race and his love for the enemy, for somebody whose germ threatens the purity of his race, in spite of his love for her, he beats her and he wrecks the cellar and he destroys her face in that movie scene. Now, who is the rodent here? If there's something Jesus knows about you and I, it is the real danger that we all face is not so much something out there, somebody that frightens us, somebody that distresses us. The danger is in here, in the part of us that wants to cut ourselves off from them. Mother Teresa was once asked why she does what she does. And she said that she engages in her ministry of love because she is far too aware of the Hitler that lives within inside of her. Surprised? Well, that even a saint like Mother Teresa is able to acknowledge that she herself has a shadowy side? Well, it doesn't surprise Jesus. Jesus knows that we all have the full potential in our hearts to do good and to do evil. He just wishes we understood it too. Meanwhile, he offers himself to everyone who still needs a scapegoat. He says, I'll take your blame. You can give it to me. Give me everything that you hate. Give me the things that you fear, out there and in here. Give it to me. I'm not afraid of getting dirty. Germs do not bother me. No, instead, come. Come to me. Take a place at my table. Whoever you are, come. Take and eat. For this is my body. Give it for